Your company paid for my dress, Sophia Blake said, placing the corporate black card on a silver tray. Maybe it finally knows who deserves to shine. The sentence moved across the glass ballroom faster than the music. At the top of a Manhattan hotel, 40 stories above wet streets and yellow cabs, the anniversary pre-party for Whitman Financial Group glittered beneath crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows, and walls of white orchids arranged around the company logo. Waiters in black jackets carried champagne. Clients shook hands beside marble cocktail tables. A pianist played something soft enough to make every insult sound expensive. Claire Whitman stood near the charity display in a simple ivory dress, her hair pinned low, her face calm in the way women become calm when pain arrives in public and demands an audience. She looked down at the black card on the tray. Her company name was printed in silver across the front. Whitman Financial Group. The same name she had once typed alone on incorporation papers in a rented office with a leaking ceiling and a printer that jammed every Friday. Now that name sat beneath Sophia's manicured fingers like a trophy. Sophia wore a silver evening gown that caught every chandelier above her. A diamond bracelet flashed on her wrist when she lifted her champagne glass. Her smile was delicate, almost polite, but her eyes stayed on Claire, waiting for the wound to show. Grant said it was approved under brand presence, she added, her voice sweet enough for witnesses. I suppose a company image needs someone fresh. A few guests looked away. One junior analyst froze with a tray of appetizers in his hand. Near the windows, Margaret Collins, the payroll director, stopped mid-conversation and turned her eyes toward the card. Grant Whitman stood beside Sophia in a black tuxedo, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a glass he had not tasted. At 41, he still had the kind of face people trusted too quickly, handsome in a polished, practiced way, as if confidence itself had been tailored for him. He glanced at Claire, then at the card, then back at Sophia. He did not correct her. He did not reach for the tray. He did not say that company funds were not gifts for his mistress. Instead, he gave the room a small smile, the one he used when he wanted discomfort to obey him. Claire, he said quietly, do not make this awkward. It is just marketing. Just marketing. The words landed harder than Sophia's insult because they carried his permission. Claire felt the old ache open beneath her ribs, not loud, not dramatic, only familiar. She saw the company logo reflected in the tray, distorted by silver curves and candlelight. She saw Sophia's receipt folded beside the card, the total printed in clean black numbers. Dress, stylist, hotel suite, champagne upgrade, all charged to a cost center Claire had built for client relations, not humiliation. For one breath, everyone seemed to wait for her to break. Claire did not. She picked up the receipt, folded it once with steady fingers, and slipped it into her small evening purse. Then she looked at Grant, not with anger, but with something colder. Recognition. Across the room, the digital wall clock above the private bar read 9:17 p.m. Payroll cutoff was less than 3 hours away. The receipt in Claire's purse felt heavier than paper because it carried a history no one in the ballroom could see. While the pianist continued playing and Sophia's laughter drifted near the windows, Claire's mind returned to a different kind of room, smaller than the coat closet behind the hotel kitchen, with one cracked window, a metal filing cabinet, and a folding table she had bought from a closing office supply store in Queens. That was where Whitman Financial Group had begun, not beneath chandeliers, not beside champagne towers, but under a buzzing fluorescent light that made every late night look pale. She had been 28 then, wearing the same black flats until the soles wore thin, answering client emails at 2 a.m., fixing invoice errors by hand, and teaching herself payroll software from printed manuals because she could not afford a full-time finance team. The first 3 employees had worked at mismatched desks. The coffee machine leaked. The printer jammed so often that Claire learned to listen for the exact sound before the paper tore. On the Friday before their first official payroll run, she had sat alone with a cold sandwich, a calculator, and a bank balance that left no room for mistakes. She remembered the names on that first direct deposit file more clearly than she remembered the amount of her own rent that month. Angela from compliance, who had 2 children and needed health insurance. Marcus from client services, who had left a safer job because he believed in Claire's model. Denise from operations, who came in early every morning and cleaned the conference table before clients arrived because there was no cleaning service yet. Payroll had never been an abstract system to Claire. It was the promise that people who gave their hours, their trust, and their lives to a company would not be treated as decorations. Grant had entered the story later, after the office moved to Midtown and the company logo finally looked expensive enough for people to admire. At first, Claire had believed his confidence helped. He wore good suits, remembered names at investor dinners, and knew how to make difficult rooms feel lighter. When they married, he began appearing in company photographs, then donor events, then advisory meetings where his title sounded more substantial than his work. Claire allowed it because marriage, to her, meant sharing the light without keeping score. His name was added to executive benefits after he said the optics would be cleaner. His travel allowance was approved because he said clients expected him beside her. His payroll classification became executive advisor because he said the title would make introductions easier. Each small permission had arrived wrapped in practical language. Each one had been signed by Claire during years when she still mistook trust for partnership. Now, standing in a hotel ballroom 40 stories above Manhattan, she could see the path with painful clarity. The company she built from unpaid weekends and sleepless payroll nights had become, in Grant's hands, a wallet for his pride. The black card on the tray was not just a card. It was every quiet boundary he had crossed while smiling as if permission never expired. Claire looked across the room at Margaret Collins, who had been with the company long enough to remember the old folding table. Margaret's eyes briefly met hers, then moved to the purse where the receipt had disappeared. No words passed between them. None were needed. The system Claire had once built to protect employees still knew how to protect the company. Sophia knew the silence had protected her, so she stepped further into it. She lifted the champagne flute to her mouth without drinking, letting the diamond bracelet flash again beneath the chandelier light, and turned toward a cluster of clients near the white orchid wall. "It is funny," she said, her voice light and polished, "how everyone talks about company culture until someone actually understands how to make a company look desirable." A thin laugh came from someone who did not want to be the first to seem offended. Claire heard it and felt the sound settle against her skin like cold rain. Grant should have stopped it then. He should have taken the card from the tray, apologized to the room, and remembered that the logo behind them was not decoration. Instead, he slipped his hand to the small of Sophia's back with the ease of a man endorsing a decision already made. "Sophia has been helping us rethink brand presence," he said. "Events like this are about perception." Claire looked at him, and for one moment the ballroom narrowed to his face. Perception. That was the word he had used the first time he asked for an executive title. Perception. The word he used when he wanted a travel allowance. Perception. The word he used when he said clients expected to see him standing beside her, smiling as if the company had been built by marriage instead of labor. Sophia turned back to Claire with a softer smile now, the kind meant to look harmless in front of witnesses. "I hope you do not mind," she said. "Grant said the company could cover the suite too. He said you always over budget for these things." The junior analyst finally lowered his tray and looked at the floor. Margaret Collins remained near the private bar, very still, one hand resting against the rim of her glass. Claire did not answer immediately. She watched a waiter lift the black card from the silver tray and place it beside a small leather check presenter. The receipt inside it had a second copy, folded cleanly. Sophia noticed Claire's eyes move toward it and smiled wider. "It is all properly coded," she said. "Brand presence consultant." Grant handled it. The phrase did something strange to the room. It made the insult administrative. It made betrayal look like a line item. Claire reached for the leather presenter before anyone could stop her. She opened it, not with anger, but with the calm precision of someone reviewing a contract. The charges were printed in neat columns: wardrobe styling, luxury suite upgrade, event beauty services, private champagne request. Beneath them, under authorization, was Grant Whitman's employee identification number. Under cost center was client relations. Under vendor note was Sophia Blake, brand presence consultant. Claire's thumb paused over that line. She could feel Grant watching her now, not worried for the company, not ashamed before the employees in the room, but irritated that she had forced paperwork into a moment he wanted to keep social. "Claire," he said again, lower this time. "This is not the place." She looked up. The chandeliers burned gold above them. The company logo glowed white against the orchid wall. Employees, clients, and bored guests pretended not to stare while staring anyway. "Not the place for what?" she asked softly. Grant's jaw tightened. "For making people uncomfortable." There it was. The old request dressed in a tuxedo. "Be quiet so the room can stay beautiful. Absorb the disrespect so no one has to acknowledge who caused it. Let the woman wearing your company's money keep smiling, because correcting her would disturb the evening." Claire closed the presenter, slipped the duplicate receipt beside the first one in her purse, and gave the black card one final glance. She did not raise her voice. She did not accuse him. She only turned slightly toward Margaret, and the payroll director's eyes lowered once in quiet acknowledgement. Near the bar, the digital clock changed from 9:17 to 9:18 p.m. Grant thought the night was still his. Claire knew the system had already started keeping time. 3 months before the anniversary pre-party, Claire had returned to the office after everyone else went home and found her own company waiting for her like a house with too many doors left unlocked. The Midtown headquarters looked different at night. Without clients, phones, assistants, and polished meetings, Whitman Financial Group became what it had been in the beginning. Rows of desks, soft computer lights, the scent of paper, coffee, and work. Rain pressed against the glass walls of the executive floor. Manhattan glowed below in broken lines of red brake lights and white headlights. But Claire kept her eyes on the laptop open before her. The separation papers had been signed that morning. Grant had left the attorney's office with his usual clean smile, as if marriage could be placed in a folder and stored away without leaving fingerprints. By sunset, his assistant had sent a request for continued executive travel access, extended card privileges, and approval for Sophia Blake to attend upcoming company events as a brand presence consultant. Claire read the email twice. Then she removed her wedding ring, placed it beside the keyboard, and opened the internal access registry. No music played. No dramatic speech filled the room. Only the quiet click of her trackpad as she reviewed every permission she had once approved because she trusted the man asking for it. Executive advisor compensation. Discretionary spending authority. Client relations card access. Hotel upgrade approval. Event guest clearance. Health benefits extension. Private car service. Vendor referral privileges. Grant's name appeared again and again, woven through the company like a signature that had forgotten who first gave it ink. Claire did not delete anything that night. She was too disciplined for impulse and too experienced to confuse hurt with strategy. Instead, she created a folder labeled Executive Access Review and began saving records. The first audit log showed Grant approving luxury travel under client development without a client attached. The second showed a vendor profile opened for Sophia Blake under marketing support, though no contract deliverables had been uploaded. The third showed charges routed to Claire's own cost center, as if placing them under her department would make the misuse invisible. Claire sat very still when she saw that. Not because she was surprised, but because betrayal feels different when it comes with timestamps. At 11:42 p.m., Margaret Collins knocked once on the glass wall and stepped inside with 2 paper cups of coffee. She had been payroll director long enough to understand that numbers could whisper before people confessed. She set 1 cup beside Claire's laptop and looked at the screen without touching it. "I wondered when you would ask to review this," Margaret said quietly. Claire looked at the lines of access, the active payroll status, the vendor link, and the benefits package still attached to Grant's employee identification number. "I am not asking yet," she replied. "I am documenting." Margaret nodded, and something old passed between them. The memory of the first office, the first payroll run, the first time Claire stayed late so no employee would wake up to a missed deposit. Over the next 2 weeks, Claire worked after midnight while the rest of the city slept behind mirrored windows. She restored policy language Grant had blurred. She required board confirmation for executive advisory status. She returned discretionary spending to active officers only. She added a midnight payroll cutoff review for anyone under separation-related privilege. By the time Sophia placed the black card on that silver tray months later, Claire had already rebuilt the lock. Grant was not watching a wounded wife hesitate. He was standing inside a system that had quietly learned how to close. Margaret Collins had never needed a raised voice to know when a number was lying. She had spent 20 years in payroll, long enough to understand that a company did not bleed all at once. It lost money in small permissions, soft approvals, missing descriptions, and names that stayed active after their purpose had expired. 3 months before Sophia smiled under the chandeliers, Margaret had sat alone in her office on the 34th floor with a printed payroll register, a yellow legal pad, and the kind of silence that made every irregularity louder. Grant Whitman's name appeared under executive advisor compensation, still active, still receiving monthly payment, still attached to travel reimbursement, health benefits, private car allowance, and discretionary spending access. On paper, it looked ordinary because ordinary systems trusted old titles until someone questioned them. Margaret questioned everything. She clicked into the employee profile and saw the first red flag. Advisory agreement expired, board renewal not attached. She clicked again and found the second. Spending authority extended through separation review, but no active project assigned. The third came from vendor management. Sophia Blake, brand presence consultant, approved under a marketing support category with no deliverables, no signed scope, and no department head confirmation. The profile had been created using Grant's credentials. Margaret removed her glasses and set them beside the keyboard. Outside her office, the city was quiet behind glass, but inside the screen, the story was moving with timestamps. Hotel suite upgrade, luxury wardrobe styling, event beauty services, private champagne request, brand presence expense, client relations cost center, Claire's cost center. Margaret leaned back slowly, not shocked, but saddened in the way loyal employees become saddened when they realize a company's trust has been treated like loose change. She remembered Claire at 28, sitting on the floor of the old office with payroll files spread around her because the folding table was not wide enough. She remembered the first time Claire delayed her own salary so the staff direct deposits could clear. She remembered Claire calling from a client airport lounge, asking if Angela's health insurance enrollment had gone through before asking whether the investor meeting had closed. That was the person whose cost center now carried charges for a woman who had never worked a day inside the firm. Margaret began building the report before Claire officially asked for one. She exported the access history, printed the vendor setup page, highlighted Grant's employee identification number, and attached the corporate card statement with every questionable line marked in blue. She did not use dramatic words. No betrayal, no affair, no humiliation. She used the language that systems respected: unauthorized privilege continuation, expired advisory classification, unsupported vendor profile, misallocated client relations expenses, potential misuse of company funds. At the bottom, she added one sentence in plain English: recommend payroll status review before next processing cutoff. The next morning, she placed the confidential file inside a matte gray folder and carried it to Claire's office. Claire was standing by the window, the Hudson River pale beneath a winter sky, her wedding ring no longer on her hand. She opened the folder and read every page without sitting down. Her face did not change until she reached Sophia's vendor profile. Then her eyes closed for one breath. When she opened them again, the hurt was still there, but it had been given structure. Who else has seen this? Claire asked. Only me, Margaret said. And if you authorize it, Daniel Mercer should review the policy language before payroll closes. Claire touched the edge of the report, the paper crisp beneath her fingers. Not yet, she said. Let him show the system exactly who he is. Now, back in the glass ballroom, as Sophia laughed near the orchid wall and Grant called misuse marketing, Margaret watched Claire slip the second receipt into her purse. The gray folder no longer sat in Margaret's office. It was already with corporate counsel. The audit trail was already complete. All that remained was time. Daniel Mercer arrived at Claire's office 2 days after Margaret delivered the gray folder, carrying a leather briefcase, reading glasses, and the careful expression of a man who knew that policy could become a blade only if it was held correctly. He had represented Whitman Financial Group for 11 years, long enough to remember when Claire reviewed contracts herself at a borrowed conference table and asked more questions about employee protections than investor comfort. Now he sat across from her in the glass-walled office while winter light moved across the Hudson River behind her. The gray folder lay open between them. Margaret Collins sat to Claire's left with a payroll register, an access map, and 3 printed audit logs aligned so neatly that the room felt almost surgical. Daniel read without speaking for a long time. Claire did not rush him. She watched his eyes move from Grant's expired advisory agreement to Sophia's unsupported vendor profile, then to the corporate card charges routed through client relations. Every page sounded faintly as he turned it. Paper against paper. Permission against proof. At last, Daniel removed his glasses and placed them on the folder. The policy is clear, he said. An executive advisor remains active only while a board-approved scope is in effect. His scope expired. The continued payroll status can be reviewed and suspended. The vendor profile connected to Ms. Blake lacks deliverables and department authorization. The spending privileges attached through Mr. Whitman can be terminated pending audit. Margaret's pen paused over her legal pad. Claire looked down at the line bearing Grant's employee identification number. It was strange how small a number could look after carrying so much entitlement. And if he uses the card again? Claire asked. Daniel folded his hands. Then the misuse is current, documented, and directly connected to his access. It strengthens the suspension. It also allows payroll to remove him from active status before the next processing cycle. When? Claire asked. Margaret answered this time. Midnight cutoff. If authorized before 11:59 p.m., his status can be changed before the system locks the next run. Benefits suspension follows automatically. Corporate card access terminates with executive status unless separately authorized. Claire sat very still. Outside the office, employees moved through the corridor carrying laptops, coffee cups, and ordinary responsibilities. People whose paychecks could not become someone's vanity. People whose health insurance, rent, childcare, and student loans depended on systems doing what they promised. Grant had never understood that part. He saw payroll as a title confirming his importance. Claire saw it as trust moving on a schedule. Wait, she said. Daniel studied her carefully. Waiting may allow him to spend more. Claire closed the folder with one calm hand. Then the record will show he was not confused. He was comfortable. No one argued. Margaret wrote the instruction in careful block letters. Conditional payroll review, pending new misuse before midnight cutoff. Over the next several weeks, Claire did not confront Grant when he asked about continued access. She did not reply to Sophia's event requests beyond formal approvals routed through the system. She let the locks remain invisible. She let the audit trail breathe. She let every timestamp become its own witness. Now, back in the glass ballroom at 9:18 p.m., Sophia's silver gown shimmered under money she had not earned, and Grant smiled as if the company still belonged to the confidence in his voice. Across the room, Margaret checked her phone once. Daniel Mercer had arrived downstairs and was being escorted to the executive level. Claire felt the receipt inside her purse like a sealed verdict. The black card had already done what it needed to do. It had told the truth in numbers. By 10:46 p.m., the pre-party had become the anniversary dinner, and the glass ballroom seemed to shine brighter because everyone was trying harder not to see what had already happened. The white orchids still framed the Whitman Financial Group logo, but now the lights had softened. The pianist had been replaced by a string quartet, and guests sat at round tables dressed in cream linen with black menu cards placed beside crystal glasses. Manhattan stretched beyond the windows like a field of scattered diamonds, beautiful from 40 stories up, distant enough to make consequences feel unreal. Sophia sat at Grant's right hand in the silver gown paid for under company expense, the diamond bracelet bright against her wrist, the small satin clutch beside her plate marked in Claire's memory from the same receipt, now resting inside her purse. She did not look embarrassed. She looked encouraged. Grant had placed her at the main table, close enough to clients for status, close enough to Claire for cruelty. Claire sat across from them, her ivory dress quiet. Beneath the chandelier light, her hands resting beside an untouched glass of water. She had chosen not to move seats. Leaving would have turned the insult into a rumor. Staying made it evidence. A senior partner lifted his glass for a toast to growth, discipline, and leadership. Grant stood after him, smiling as if those words belonged naturally in his mouth. Whitman Financial Group has always understood presentation, he said, looking around the table before letting his gaze settle briefly on Sophia. A company is not only what it earns. It is how it appears when the room is watching. Sophia smiled at that, soft and triumphant. Then she turned toward Claire with the gentle expression of someone setting down a knife made of silk. That must be hard, she said. Building something practical, then watching someone else make it beautiful. The table became still. Forks paused over plates. A waiter near the wall stopped pouring wine and looked down quickly. Grant did not sit. He gave a small laugh, meant to dissolve the sentence before it could be called what it was. Sophia means the brand has evolved, he said. Sometimes a company outgrows the person who started it. Claire looked at him then. Not at Sophia. At him. The man who had once asked her to add his name to advisory payroll because investors liked a husband beside a founder. The man who had turned trust into a title, then a title into access, then access into a gift for another woman. Does it? Claire asked. Her voice was low, but the people nearest her heard it. Grant's smile held, but the skin around his eyes tightened. Claire, this is a celebration. Of what? She asked. No one touched their glasses. The string quartet continued playing near the back of the room, delicate and useless against the silence forming at the table. Sophia reached for her clutch and leaned back as if she had already won. Of knowing how to enjoy success, she said. Not everyone has the taste for it. Claire's eyes moved to the clutch, then to the bracelet, then to the black menu card beside Sophia's plate. Each object seemed to glow with a line from the audit report. Wardrobe styling. Event accessories. Private champagne. Request. Luxury suite upgrade. Grant finally sat down, but not because he was calm, because the room had shifted out of his control. Across the ballroom, Margaret Collins entered through a side door with Daniel Mercer beside her. Margaret carried a matte gray folder. Daniel carried no champagne, no smile, only a leather folio held against his side. Claire saw them, but did not turn her head. She only placed her napkin beside her plate and looked at the digital clock reflected faintly in the dark window glass. 11:32 p.m., 28 minutes before payroll cutoff. Sophia laughed once more, light and careless, wearing the company's money like proof. Claire did not correct her. The correction was already walking across the ballroom. Margaret Collins did not hurry across the ballroom. That made her arrival worse. She moved between the tables with Daniel Mercer beside her, the matte gray folder held flat against her chest, her black dress plain among the sequins and satin, her expression as calm as a bank vault closing. Daniel followed with the leather folio under one arm, his face unreadable beneath the chandelier light. Guests noticed them before Grant did. The senior partner lowered his glass. A board member turned in her chair. The string quartet continued playing, but the melody seemed thinner now, as if the room itself had begun listening to something else. Sophia was still smiling when Margaret reached the main table. Claire, Margaret said gently. Claire looked up from her untouched water glass. Is it time? Margaret glanced toward the dark window where the reflection of the digital clock hovered above the city lights. 11:58 p.m., almost. Grant set his napkin down slowly. What is this? His voice was quiet, but the polish had cracked at the edges. Daniel placed his folio on the table and opened it with careful hands. A payroll status review authorized under the executive access policy. Sophia gave a small laugh, too sharp to sound relaxed. During dinner? No one answered her. Margaret took a tablet from the folder and placed it beside Claire, not facing the guests, not exposing private employee information, only showing the restricted executive dashboard with Grant's name, his employee identification number, and the words active payroll status highlighted in blue. Claire did not touch it. She looked at Grant instead. He stared at the screen, then at Margaret. I am an executive advisor. Daniel removed one document from the folio. Your advisory scope expired 3 months ago. No board renewal was attached. Spending authority remained active pending separation review. Grant's jaw tightened. That is a technicality. Margaret's voice remained soft. Payroll is made of technicalities. That is why people get paid correctly. A faint chill moved through the table. Sophia shifted in her chair, her silver gown catching the light with each uneasy breath. The clutch beside her plate looked suddenly small, almost foolish. Grant leaned toward Claire. You are really going to do this here? Claire did not answer. The question was not honest. He had done it here first, under orchids, chandeliers, clients, and employees. He had made company money public when he let Sophia wear it like a victory. Margaret looked at the clock reflected in the window. 11:59 p.m. She entered a final authorization code. Daniel signed the digital review with his stylus. On the tablet, a confirmation window appeared. Executive access review pending payroll cutoff. Grant reached for the black card still lying inside the leather check presenter near Sophia's champagne glass. This is absurd, he said. Claire, tell them to stop. Claire's eyes lowered briefly to the card, then rose again. I did not build a company, so you could confuse access with ownership. The clock changed. Midnight arrived without music, without announcement, without mercy. The tablet refreshed once. Blue turned gray. The line under Grant's name changed first, removed from active payroll. Then another, executive benefits suspended. Then another, corporate spending access terminated. At the same moment, Margaret opened the vendor panel. Sophia Blake, brand presence consultant, shifted from active to frozen pending audit. Sophia's smile disappeared so completely that the room seemed to see the woman beneath the glitter for the first time. Grant stared at the screen as if the system had betrayed him when all it had done was remember. Around the table, no one spoke. The chandelier light reflected in the tablet, in the empty champagne glasses, in the tiny silver logo on the black card that no longer worked. Margaret closed the gray folder with both hands. Payroll has completed the cutoff, she said. His name has been removed from the active run. Claire remained seated, still and composed, while the silence settled over the dinner like the final page of an audit report. Claire did not smile when Grant's name disappeared from the active payroll run. That would have made the moment smaller than it was. Around the main table, the silence held so tightly that even the crystal glasses seemed afraid to ring. Sophia sat beside Grant with her hands folded over the silver gown, the fabric still catching chandelier light, as if it had not just become part of a frozen vendor file. Grant stared at the tablet, his reflection pale in the dark screen between status changes. Removed from active payroll. Executive benefits suspended. Corporate spending access terminated. The words were plain, almost dull, and that made them colder. There was no insult in them. No emotion. No scene. Only a system returning to order. Claire, Grant said at last, his voice lower now, stripped of the easy authority he had worn all evening. You cannot just erase me. Claire looked at him across the table, past the untouched plates, the black menu cards, the orchids, and the company logo glowing behind his shoulder. I did not erase you, she said. I removed access that never belonged to you. Sophia looked toward the black card inside the leather check presenter, then toward Margaret, as if someone might explain a softer version of what had happened. Margaret did not soften it. She placed the disabled card on top of the gray folder with 2 careful fingers. Daniel Mercer closed his folio and gave Grant the kind of professional nod that said the conversation had left the territory of charm and entered documentation. Pending audit, Daniel said. All charges connected to the vendor profile will be reviewed. No further expenses may be submitted through company accounts. Sophia's lips parted, but no polished sentence arrived. For the first time that night, her beauty had no budget behind it. Grant pushed back from the table, then stopped when his phone lit up. A notification appeared on the screen, executive badge access suspended. Across the ballroom, near the private elevator bank, a security light changed from green to red on the access panel where his credential had always opened every door. He saw it. So did Claire. She remembered giving him that badge years ago, smiling because she thought sharing a door meant sharing a life. Now the door had simply learned the difference. Claire stood slowly. No one asked her to sit down. The room opened around her with quiet respect, not the hungry attention of gossip, but the careful stillness people offer when they realize they have witnessed a boundary return to its rightful place. She took the receipt from her purse and laid it beside the disabled black card. The company logo printed at the top looked small beneath the chandeliers, but Claire knew what it represented. Payroll runs made on time. Employees who trusted direct deposit before rent was due. Clients who believed their money was protected. Late nights when responsibility mattered more than applause. Company money is not a costume, she said. It is not a hotel suite, a champagne upgrade, or proof that someone belongs beside power. It belongs to the work, to the people who earn it, and to the promises this company makes. Grant lowered his eyes first. Sophia followed a second later. Claire did not ask for the gown back. She did not demand an apology in front of the table. She had no need to turn consequence into theater. Margaret gathered the gray folder. Daniel took the tablet, the screen still showing Grant's inactive status. Claire picked up her evening purse and walked away from the main table, past the white orchids and the company logo, toward the glass doors leading to the executive hallway. At the elevator, the access panel glowed. She placed her badge against it. Green light. Open doors. Behind her, Grant remained at the table with a card that no longer worked, a title that no longer paid, and a silence he could no longer control. Claire stepped into the elevator alone. As the doors closed, the payroll dashboard refreshed one final time above Margaret's folder. Next run approved.